Hello, my name is Thomas Bahle. I'm a sociologist working at the University of Mannheim in Germany in the field of comparative social policy. The board of VirCamp Consortium invited me to give this lecture on welfare systems. In the first part of this lecture, I introduce the concept of welfare production. The second part presents the three welfare regime types as defined by Gösta Esping-Andersen in 1990. The third part discusses the impact of welfare regimes on inequality and poverty. The final part shows the major amendments to this threefold typology, which have come up during a long, critical debate. Societies organize the production and distribution of welfare in different ways. The concept of welfare production distinguishes three main spheres: the state, the market, and the family. The way in which they interact defines a welfare regime. The state is public, formally organized, and not profit-oriented. The market is private, formally organized, and profit-oriented. The family is private, informal, and not profit-oriented. These three spheres have different strengths and weaknesses, which explains why a combination is required for effective welfare production. The market, for example, is good in providing efficient solutions for a large number of persons, but weak in social solidarity and individualized arrangements. State and family are therefore necessary corrections for the market, and vice versa. The interaction between family, market, and state is the starting point for the definition of different welfare regimes. The focus of this definition is on the role of the state. A unique characteristic of welfare states are social rights. Welfare states do not simply differ by level or by size, but by the way in which they guarantee social rights to different population groups. Esping-Andersen identifies three welfare regime types, based on three dimensions which focus on the character of social rights. The first dimension is decommodification. It stands for the extent to which the state guarantees social rights independent from an individual's position on the market. The second dimension is stratification. It stands for the way in which the state structures social inequality. The third dimension is the relation between state, market, and family in general. I added a fourth dimension here, which identifies the basic underlying values for each regime type. The social democratic type is characterized by high decommodification, which means that social rights guarantee welfare independent from the market position. Low stratification, which means that social rights are guaranteed on a universal equal basis to all members of society and by a major role of the state. Social security is inclusive and high. The welfare state provides a high level of services, supporting and relieving the family. The universal and inclusive character of social security prevents social exclusion and weakens social stratification. Countries which come close to this type are Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland, the Nordic countries. The basic underlying value is equality. The liberal type has low decommodification, high stratification, and a limited role of the state. Social rights are weak, which means that individuals strongly depend on the market. The social security system strongly stratifies because social benefits stigmatize and are concentrated on the poor. Since the state provides few services, the market for the middle class and the family for the poor shoulder a heavier burden. Countries coming close to this type are the US, Canada, the UK, Ireland, Australia and New Zealand. The basic value is performance linked to competition. The conservative type is in the middle. It has a medium level of decommodification, medium stratification, and a medium role of the state. The role of the family instead is more important than in the other two types. Social security depends on market position. Since the state provides few services, the family plays a large role. Countries coming close to this type are Germany, Austria, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Italy, the continental European countries. The basic value is security. Welfare regimes tend to reproduce themselves over time. In the Nordic regime, for example, the universal character of social security, from which all members of society benefit, fosters strong political support for the welfare state. By contrast, the liberal regime exhibits strong restrictive factors, tending to limit state intervention. Social transfers focus on the poor. Hence, the middle classes do not benefit from the welfare state and do not strongly support it. So the question arises, what is the impact on social inequality and poverty? In the social democratic regime, the stratifying principle is universality, which means that it treats all citizens equally. Social benefits are universal and include all citizens and workers. Thereby, the state changes the market-based structure of social inequality. This welfare regime type produces the lowest level of inequality in comparative perspective. By contrast, in the liberal regime, the state strongly stratifies. Social benefits are selective, means-tested, and often stigmatizing. They focus on the poor, while the majority of the population depends on the market. This feature results in a deep split between poor and non-poor groups in society. For these countries, we expect a high level of inequality. The conservative regime falls in between these opposites through a stratification principle which preserves existing status differences. Social benefits depend on insurance record and tend to exclude those with interrupted working careers or low incomes. For these countries, we expect a medium level of inequality. Now, consider two examples, a young unemployed person and a single parent. Reflect a minute on how the different welfare regime types treat these two groups in ideal, typical terms. What do you expect? In the social democratic type, the state assumes responsibility for both cases. It supports, for example, the young unemployed in finding an adequate job, and he or she receives income compensation while being unemployed. To single parents, the state offers public childcare and child benefits. In the conservative type, the state treats the two cases differently and selectively. The young unemployed probably receives low or no income compensation since he has no long work record. The state may support the single parent financially, but not by childcare services, which means that unemployment is difficult. In the liberal type, the state only supports the two cases if they prove being poor. Moreover, they have to find their own way out of poverty. In the conservative as well as in the liberal type, the family has to step in, therefore. In the case of the young unemployed, this may be through money. In the case of the single parent, it may be through informal childcare. In general, one can assume that the social democratic type tends to integrate poor persons and persons with social risks into a universal welfare state based on equality. The conservative type tends to secure the social status of persons and emphasizes the role of the family. And the liberal type tends to stigmatize poor persons because it helps only them and only after a severe check of needs and needs. Now, Esping-Andersen's typology from 1990 still excluded Eastern Europe, Asian and Latin American countries, since at that time most of these countries were less developed, were no democracies and no market economies. But this has changed fundamentally, of course. And the question is now how these countries fit into the typology. There is now wide consensus in research that the typology should be amended in 3 respects. The Southern European countries constitute a distinct regime type. Although these countries, Italy, Spain, Portugal and Greece, are similar to the conservative type, their welfare states are less developed and the family plays a stronger role. Australia and New Zealand are part of the Anglo-Saxon liberal world, but their social security systems are more developed. The Asian countries also form a separate type, sharing a strong orientation towards productivity. In these countries, the state is not a counterpart to the market, as it was in Europe. But state and market operate in tandem in order to improve productivity. From these features, one can expect that the Southern European countries are highly unequal and tend to leave social risks to the family, including poverty. Australia and New Zealand are in between the liberal and the social democratic types. And the Asian countries neglect the issue of poverty, since they focus on the productive workforce only. And what about Eastern Europe? There is no consensus on Eastern Europe yet. Some regard these countries as a distinct welfare regime type, since they share a socialist past and have had similar problems since the fall of communism. And they all have less developed welfare states. Yet these countries are also heterogeneous. Some of them share characteristics with the conservative type, for example Poland, Czech Republic or Hungary, which had, by the way, already been the case before the time of communism. The Baltic countries, in contrast, have developed towards the liberal type. And the southeastern European countries, like Romania, Bulgaria or Croatia, are similar to Southern Europe, with rudimentary welfare states, less developed market economies, and a strong role of the family. One may therefore conclude that Eastern Europe does not form a distinct new welfare regime type, but that these countries can be better included into the different existing types. Now, to conclude, I think that the concept of welfare regimes is a valuable tool for analyzing cross-national variations in welfare production and distribution. It's also a good starting point for analyzing social policies, inequality and poverty. However, the concept does not substitute for theory or empirical investigation. It only offers a first orientation. How many and which welfare regimes exist? This question is partly misleading, I think, since welfare regimes do not exist as empirical facts. They merely provide guidance for research. If you want to deepen your understanding on this issue, please have a look at the references and the further readings included at the end of this lecture. Now, I want to thank you for your attention, and I do really hope that you will find this lecture and the concept of welfare regimes useful for your own analysis, especially if you analyze the position of poor persons in a country and how they are treated by the welfare state. So, thanks again, and all the best for your further studies. Goodbye.